Hi, everyone. I'm Kyler from the Content Mix, and I'm excited to be here with Bertrand Serrano, a marketing manager at Danone. As many of us know, Danone is a leading multi-local food and beverage company building on health-focused and fast-growing categories in three different areas: essential dairy and plant-based products, waters, and specialized nutrition. Bertrand works in the essential dairy and plant-based products division, helping brands and markets accelerate and deliver digitally while connecting the brands with their audience. With years of experience in project and customer management, Bertrand has taken this experience to Danone, where he's been working since 2019. So, without much further ado, I want to thank Bertrand for joining us today on the Content Mix. It's a pleasure to have you on the show.
Thanks for having me.
So, we'll just dive in from the beginning, and a lot of people are probably going to want to know who you are. So, can you explain to us a bit who you are, where you're from, and kind of how you ended up getting into content marketing, especially in the European market?
Sure. So, hi everyone. I'm Bertrand. So, I come from France, as you would have heard already. I was born in the south of France. I spent most of my time there. Then I came in Paris. I think it was 2005, something like this. Obviously, because this is where I started to work, and most of my background is actually on the agency side. Started off with digital agency called Full Six. It's now part of Avas. Then another smaller agency, activation agency. Then started up my own agency with a few colleagues slash friends that we actually ran for 7 years, I think, before I joined Danone. And to your and so that's on the professional side. On the personal side, I'm happily my father of two, and that takes up a lot of my time as well.
Yeah.
And so to your point about content marketing, I guess I've always been around it. I don't think I can say that I started with this. I was always drawn to marketing, communication, advertising, to be more specific. I don't think I even knew it was actually a job, and I almost ended up in that field by accident. I was in an internship working at the Galerie Lafayette, and it had to end earlier than expected for like reasons that were completely out of our control. So I was like, I need to find something else. And a friend of mine was working in an event agency, and saying, "Hey, we have openings. Come check it out." And I met with the head of the planning of this agency, and I was like, "That's a job. This is like amazing to be able to work in terms of how do we give a voice to the brands? How can we translate what the brands stand for in events or kind of things like that?" And this was opening a whole new world to me, and this is how it started for me, the journey in that space. And then I went on to digital agencies, and content came up a little bit later, but that's how it
Kind of
started
all
essentially.
evolved from one place, and then kind of just along the way you accumulated all these other skills and more experience and networking, and kind of ended up where you are
Exactly.
now. Just out of curiosity, because our listeners for the podcast are people who are working in content marketing in Europe, how is the market in France for like looking for a job, or do you find that there's a lot of opportunities for marketers in Paris or in France?
So the market is there's a little bit of tension, and it comes with a number of obvious reasons. The main one being the uncertainty of the situation. However, I think we're sensing positive signs, and be it in on the agency side, I think the hit was not as bad as we all thought it would be, which is a good thing. And but also on the client side, I feel that there are still a lot of openings, and especially if we look at the expert side of the discipline, these will still be very much needed. And I think there's a natural evolution in terms of in-housing some of the capabilities when you're on the client side,
Right.
that are creating openings for people. So I think the market is okay. It's not as open as it used to be a couple of years ago, but it's okay.
nowhere in the world, right, is open as it used to be, but that's really
Yeah,
positive news. I feel like we're kind of moving upward, no? And after the pandemic and everything, we're kind of seeing more positive light, especially
yeah,
with
some
marketing
kind
and
of,
job opportunities. And there's movement
yeah,
now. And people aren't
yeah,
as
light
there's
light at the end of the tunnel, no?
for sure, especially because a lot of companies were scared, with their budgets and kind of what's going to happen. So it definitely is nice to see like a lot of movement again, and we're kind of getting out of the dark place that we were in. But I was wondering because Danone is a company that everyone, I think a lot of people around the world recognize and know. So what's like your typical day at work like at Danone, and kind of especially like now that we're kind of remote and working from home, and kind of what responsibilities do you have within the company?
So I guess my position in Danone evolved a bit. I started off, and interestingly, so it was Danone was one of my former clients when I had my own agency, and it was my oldest client, and this is why I ended up working with and at Danone, and I started off looking after like websites, search, these kinds of areas, and so I'm in the global team. So I see this very much as some kind of agency position because you work with the global brands, the multi-local brands, Activia, Actimel, and you help them craft they do from a global standpoint, and then you also help the markets, the countries, because they have specific needs, and it can be for the global brands, but it can also be for the local brands. So this is how it started off, and then I dwelled a little bit into um, an initiative of how do we change the way we work with our partners uh, on the agency side so that we break the silos. The evolution of our discipline is super interesting because we saw a lot of expert aspects of the job appear over the course of the last 15 years, and and so that created a lot of specialties in the different, even in the agencies, and this is also why the big networks kept on buying small shops of expert jobs, and in the companies it was a little bit of the same. So we ended up in places where you had people looking after social on one side, then the people looking after brand equity and the big IDs on the other, and then some other people looking after whatever, actually. And I don't think it's Danone specific, it's just an industry natural evolution of how we've absorbed these new jobs and roles. And so the result is that the way we work can be sometimes a little bit siloed, and we're going back to what we used to call integrated marketing. So how do we make sure that we have a comprehensive approach, that we're not taking things in isolation but work across the board? And so essentially my work is revisiting the way we work both internally and externally with our partners so that we have a more integrated approach. And it comes through in-housing some of the capabilities. So we have the people from the agencies coming in and working with us, but it's almost like a consequence of how we evolve the ways of working more than the initial motivation. But I do believe that it provides a lot of positive impacts by getting people closer together. So it's proving to be super challenging during the pandemic. But this is what I do, and honestly, my days are I speak with the global teams, the local teams. I work with the agency, so we try to pilot new ways of working in some countries, and then we see how much we can replicate, scale some of this. It's Danone is a very, let's say, there's a lot of room for initiative, and so we try things, we trial things, and then we're like, okay, this is working, let's scale it up, and I think it's very empowering for people.
I bet. And yeah, so you mentioned that you worked a lot with, improving overall efficiency when working and organizing with both internal, external partners. And I was kind of wondering what kind of partners do you work with, like externally?
Yeah. So the biggest network of agencies we work with is WPP. So we work a lot with the group, especially on the dairy division. We have a team from WPP dedicated to working with us. So we work a lot with them, but we also have more smaller partners. We work with Oliver, with Dragons, which specialize in housing some of the capabilities around the content creation, and and we also work with any local agency that any CBU is working with, so that the idea is obviously having a roster of partners is critical for many reasons, but the idea is to make it work at local level. So if they have any specific context or any specific partners that we need to make sure we take into account, we also obviously work with them.
That's great. And it's really interesting because since it's such a big organization, it does seem like you've really focused on the local market and kind of connecting with the people who are consuming these products. So I think that's really cool. Um, and I wanted to know too, like why the content creation? You said, for example, one of the partners would be doing content creation. Is that because you want to like have local writers be working on the type of content that you're producing, or what's the reasoning behind that?
So I think there's a an increasing need to make sure that we're connecting with the audience, and I think the natural evolution you used to, especially when you were in the FMCG space, you used to come up with a new product. You put out that TV copy and a few other things, and it was almost sold by itself. uh, and I'm voluntarily simplifying the speech, but I think now we have so many touch points to activate, so many people to talk to on so many different channels, that it has to be local. And it's actually, I mean, you might have heard that the company is undergoing a major transformation, and the plan is called local first, because there's a real need to empower the countries. And I think for a brand, like for a company like Danone, that's a brand like Danone, it makes even more sense, because we're a certified B Corp in many countries and many of our divisions. And the importance of local, be it on the sourcing part or on the execution and content creation part, is fundamental. So we really want to make sure that the content we are going to create is locally relevant. So that means adapting the way we operate. There, some of it will still remain global, because when you have brands like Activia, which is one of the biggest, it's the biggest yogurt brand in the world, you have to have some of this that is defined globally, but then it has to be locally relevant. And you don't speak
Mm,
to people in Russia like you would to people in Brazil, to name
exactly.
two examples. So the local, um, anchor this in a local reality, and the local reality is both in from the insights to the content to the channels. Everything has to be adapted to the local markets, and this is what we are after.
It's so important. And it's just interesting because, I've done a lot of work in, localization and kind of this whole area. And it's just, when you reflect on it, if you think before the internet, right, kind of marketing was kind of localized because we didn't get to expand as much. But now that we have such like a global reach in terms of the marketing that we do, it's kind of now that, and especially now people want this demand. They want things content that resonates with them. The consumer wants something that is resonating with them. So we kind of have to like go back to where we were before and kind of focus more, because obviously it's easy, right, to do a marketing campaign, do one and see how it works around the world. But if you really want to kind of make a meaningful experience, with your brand, then you really have to focus on local
and
content.
and I think that's a very interesting part, because actually it I think we all got dragged by the emergence of the new channels and the land of opportunities that we were sold, or we sold ourselves,
Right.
with digital, with personalization, with all of these things. But if you go back to the basics of marketing, I think they've always been the same. It needs to resonate with your audience. It needs to mean something to them. Now we have more channels, so we need to be more conscious on how we leverage them. But the fundamentals, I don't think they have changed that much. And we've kind of lost track of that because we've been blinded by technology in terms of this is what we can do. So we focus on technology, but we forget about the meaning, we forget about the message. And this will always be the most important part of it, because if you don't have the message, if it doesn't resonate with your audience, it's as good as useless, actually.
Yeah,
So
it's like all this power that we have with technology convolutes like the real meaning of what we're trying to do, and which is
yes,
connecting with people. And I think that we've seen that even more in the past year and a half with the pandemic. Like we're all behind our
absolutely.
computer, so we kind of it's very easy to forget that if you're writing an email to somebody or you're even like simple things like that, that someone else is reading it. It's a human. So I think it's so important, like you said, that we really focus on the basics of marketing, which is connecting with an audience. And now I have
Exactly.
to ask you, if because we're talking about campaigns and content creation and all that, what's been a good example of like a successful piece of content that you've worked on or you've been involved with, or a campaign that has really worked well?
So, well, many of them, if I go back to agency life, but if I stick to more current examples, so I don't personally work on the content. I'm trying to work on how do we set ourselves up to creating the best content and efficiently and delivering the most effective results. So I guess it's kind of a non-answer, but I'll give it anyway. I
Go
think
for it.
where I'm most proud is when I see people in some markets that have no idea of who I am because they came up after, or and they are like super vocals about how they've been working on this project and what they did with it at local level without even knowing that this is something that we were working on at global level. And then it feels to me that it's their own thing, and they are super proud with the results, and they say that it delivers much better campaigns, and they are showcasing the results all through the organization. And this is like, you feel that what you've been doing is useful to people and internally, and delivering good results externally. This is like I feel that what I'm doing is useful to these people. So this is where I'm most proud.
You're acting like it's a bridge, no, between you kind of connect people
Totally.
and bring them together. And you've mentioned a lot your agency, and I want to like update our listeners a bit about this because you kind of have this entrepreneurial side as well. So if I'm not mistaken, from 2011 to 2018, you were the co-founder and like you ran a client and agency management business called Versus, which you worked
Yeah.
with new businesses and digital leads. And I think Danone, right, was one of the clients that you had there. And a lot of your work involved developing strategies and activations to properly execute campaigns on digital, print, packaging, and many more channels. And some of your clients included, like I said before, Danone, where you worked on Light and Free and Activia, Evian, Ricard, and JP Gaultier. And so, yeah, very cool that you've done this as well. You kind of had this agency experience and you've kind of gone back and forth between the two. So, how did like Versus come about? Like, how did that project start? And how was it like starting your own company and running a successful company? How was that experience?
So it was, as most of the different steps that I've taken throughout my short career, it was almost by accident. And I guess somewhere I had in my mind that I wanted to run something at some point. But I really believe in the opportunities of meeting. So one of my closest friends was actually working in a big ad agency, and he had the will of creating something, and he was working on it. And and so I left my job, and we were discussing, and he was starting what he was doing, and so he needed a little bit of help on digital expertise in some areas. And so it started off like this. So when I say by accident, it really is by accident. And then after a few project, we were like, okay, there, it feels that there's a need to do something. So I joined the adventure like this. So I was a co-founder, as in I was there at the beginning, but I honestly I cannot claim that this was my idea to create the agency. I just came in at the right time, and and then it grew, and we were super naive in terms of, yeah, we can build an agency from scratch and do this. And I don't know if I would do it again tomorrow, but I regret nothing. It was one of the most enriching experience, and I think it also provides a lot of different perspective as you move on, and you go back to being an employee of a company, and seeing it growing and working to grow it, and actually the work with Danone as a group was, it started off with the limited editions. You might have seen this Evian bottle designed by designers. So we started off with this, and then we went into social content for Evian, and we saw the content that we were doing back, I think it was in 2013, being picked up by news outlet, like this is what Evian is doing,
Wow.
and you feel like what you're doing is somehow having an impact on people, and it was, I mean, it was an amazing experience. The only thing is that running an agency is a huge challenge, and I felt that, so first of all, we were like 6 partners, and it's a lot for a very small agency. And so I just wanted to see something else, and I was considering doing actually completely different things that what I'm doing now. And again, by accident, my one of my former clients, who will recognize herself, I'm sure, called me and said, "Hey, you left. I'm taking this new role. You want to come help?" And I was like, well, "Sure, why not?" And what was a mission ended up being a year or so contract before I ended up actually in Danone.
Yeah. So you actually mentioned a couple of things about what would you do differently when running an agency, and that was my next question. So you said that you had a lot of partners and kind of didn't really know the expectations, I guess, behind running an agency. Was there anything else that you would have done differently if you had the opportunity to do it again?
I think many things we could have done differently, and probably tomorrow we would be doing each of us differently. I think what matters is more like, what do you take from that? And I am super proud of this experience. I am super proud of what we've achieved, and I've learned that running a business with friends is challenging. I've learned that um, uh, aligning decisions on where you want to take a company when you're a lot is challenging. But I've also learned that communication is key, and this is how you make it work, and this is how you end up making it work over the course of 7 years. And actually the agency is still running,
Oh,
and
cool.
the guys are still making it the success that it was. So I think
Fantastic.
it's a fantastic experience, and i I think there are many areas where we could have done things differently, but again, I think the most important part is, how do you make it your own, and how do you make sure that you have this somewhere in your mind when you move on to your next role, job, position, whatever it is.
Exactly. And from those, I wouldn't call them mistakes, but maybe like things you would have done differently. That's how you learn. So you kind of take those as learning lessons and kind of
So
evolve.
I, I think the most precious thing that I took with me is some kind of sane distance. When you run your own shop, you're like, I need to win this because this is paying the salaries, basically. So when you come in as an employee, and you see a lot of things, you're like, oh, this is really different from, especially in such a large group. I mean, all of the experiences I've had were smaller setups than
Okay.
anything like Danone. Danone is a huge, large corporation.
Right.
So I think having this same distance with what is a job at the end of the day, is also super healthy, because you try to keep a perspective on what you're doing, and you're not dragged by the daily things or the smaller things. You try to manage tactics and strategy, and I think this is really something that would have been complicated for me to reach if I hadn't had this entrepreneurial
For sure.
mindsets. And the other part is the entrepreneurial culture,
It's a tricky
is that
word.
I just do it. I don't, and a company like Danone allowing us to do this is amazing.
It's really
You
cool.
don't need to wait too many alignment, too many things. You're like, I'm trying this. You make sure that people are okay with it, and that you just run with it. And
It's really
sometimes it
cool.
works, sometimes it doesn't. But that is a precious
Yeah,
aspect of the job and of the company.
for sure. It's like you have a lot of flexibility to take risk and try new things, which is, like you said, part of being an entrepreneur, right? It's kind of taking a risk and not knowing what's going to come and seeing how it works. And that's really cool that you feel like you have the freedom, no, the liberty to do that, which is
Yeah.
really great. Now, you have a lot of experience too working with other marketing agencies and companies. What do you think like a lot of agencies or companies get wrong when it comes to marketing?
I think so. That's a tricky question.
Tricky question.
I think we tend to privilege, and I say we as a community, the marketing community, to privilege tactics over strategy.
Okay.
We're super short-term focused, activation focused. We have bursts, and because this is how we're, it's nobody's fault really. It's like everybody is waiting for your immediate results, and I think, I don't know if it's something that we are doing wrong or the agencies are doing wrong, because I coming from the other side, I think it's never as simple as the agency is getting it wrong or the client is briefing on the wrong way. I think it's a joint effort, whether it's a success or a failure, and I think this is exactly the biggest challenge, is keeping an eye on the long run while making sure you're delivering the daily stuff that you need to deliver, and but making sure that you're tracking the results on the long term
Right.
and not only on the short term.
Yeah, it's kind of having like a dual, mindset of short term
Yeah,
and long term and keeping them in sync. It's so
hugely
important.
challenging, because the daily pressure
Yeah.
to focus on
Yeah.
things of the now is incredibly high.
Yeah, for sure. And for like, I guess what skills do you think marketers nowadays would need to like be successful in today's world and today's market?
So that's one of them.
Would be one
Honestly,
of those, no? Hmm.
the ability to be long term driven while also taking care of the short term is and nothing is mine. Huh? Yeah, this is all coming from Mark Ritson, who is a marketer I deeply admire, and I encourage everybody to read and watch everything he's saying. Is a no BS kind of guy, and in our discipline, it's something that is rare enough to be
Yeah.
to be highlighted, and I agree with essentially everything he's saying. Is one of my ultimate reference, and I think this ability to be able to strategize while delivering the short term is critical. The other thing is more at companies level is favor diversity. We're all, so we have a very, usually large companies have a very diverse geographical backgrounds when it comes to people, but in terms of trainings, in terms of backgrounds, it's super frightening for big organizations to hire people with different backgrounds. But I think it's incredibly enriching,
It is.
and I think it's something that should be, especially when it comes to marketing. We are all very much shaped the same way,
Yeah.
and I think it's very enriching to have different backgrounds, different views, different experiences, even
Mm.
people coming from different jobs, because ultimately connecting with audience, I mean, journalists could be excellent marketeers in some
Hmm.
areas, and you have a lot of things and experiences that can help um, enrich the way we approach the discipline. So
Completely.
I
I think
would
that's
focus
so
on these two.
important, like diversity and also just knowing that you can learn so much from other people with different backgrounds and especially like
Yes.
training and formation. And I think it's really cool. And now we're talking about what companies need to do to be successful, but we're curious to know a bit more about what you do, maybe like a daily habit or something that you like an exercise you do or something that helps you stay productive and like kind of help you with your success.
So I think curiosity is fundamental. But curiosity, but also caring for going one step beyond. I think, for instance, that Coca thing with Ronaldo that happened a couple of weeks ago. I think it was super interesting because everybody had a point of view, and we saw many things. It was super easy to say, "Hey, this the share of Coke dropped, and this is all because of Ronaldo."
Crazy.
But actually, if
Mm,
you dig a little bit deeper, you understand that no, it's not, and that it's always a little bit more complicated than we like to say it is.
mm,
And I think you need to be curious, but you need to have the willing to go a little bit deeper so that
yeah,
you actually understand and you can take something out of it and learn something out of it and apply something out of it, rather than just saying, hey, this is why we need huge influencers because this is what they do. No, it's
right.
not the case. And so I think curiosity is, look outside, and I chose a reference business, but look outside in terms of art, in terms of culture, in terms
Mm,
of anything, and care for other things than your daily job. This is
mm,
something, this is a richness that you bring in your job,
so true.
and I think it's super important.
And it's kind of like a theme I've seen a lot, like among a lot of marketers, and especially content creators, is this like relentless passion to learn and to be curious. And that's kind of, I think, the most successful people I've encountered have been people who are really willing to like deep dive into different topics and kind of learn more about other things that may not even impact them directly, but keeping that awareness and having that like will or desire to research and learn and become an expert in a way on a certain topic or a certain area. It's something that's so important in our field.
Yes, and I think we ultimately we talk to people. Our job is talking to people. So being curious about people, about what they do, what they care about, what society is, where it is going, what are the tensions that are seeding the way we behave, is something that you actually need to be a good marketer. You need to be curious. If you're not curious, you're missing out on some of the biggest aspects of our job.
100%. And that's kind of
Com-
why this
this,
podcast exists, right? I think
I
um,
guess.
for one end, from our company, I think it was really important for us to like be able to talk and meet people who are working in the field and different, industries to learn from them, but also to share this information with all the listeners that we have. I think that's really cool because people are tuning in, and every week you have someone that's, yeah, they work in marketing, but they're from a different country, they have different experience, they have done different things in their lives that really resonate with people and kind of expands your mind. So it's kind of cool that you say that because that's kind of like a philosophy that drives the podcast, I think, is curiosity and learning from one another for
Yeah,
sure.
and I think it's an amazing initiative to I mean, looking at the diversity of people you've had in the show and the different experiences that they've shared, I think it's both humbling to be part of this, and
Oh
also
yeah,
super
thank you.
interesting to go through it.
That's great to hear. And it's awesome. For me, I always say it's a great job because I'm literally connecting from my home and I get every week I get to meet all these really cool people. So it's really fun. I love it. And like you said, I like to talk to people and get to know them. So it's been really great. And in terms of other recommendations, because people really like to know if you have any like apps or tools or platforms or books that you really enjoyed or have impacted you. You talked about your role model before, your inspiration, but anything else in
Yeah.
terms of
So
that?
so I don't think I would be very consistent if I were if I was saying, yeah, sure, I use the latest app or whatever, even though I think you need to be curious and you need
Mm.
to I mean, I downloaded Clubhouse, I looked at how it works and all of that, but I I I think the daily routine for me is so keeping my head out, making sure that I do anything else. Kids are super helpful, so have kids. It's a great thing to keep your head out.
Yeah.
And more seriously, I think making sure you get the basics right. Uh, we love to believe that we are inventing new stuff. A lot of people have done a lot of great work before us, and that we can take and apply and or evolve. And I think reading like Binet and Feel for the long and short of it, um, reading how brands grow, reading all these like references is already securing a solid 2/3 of what your job is about.
Right.
And 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 it's freeing up your mind actually, because if you get this right and you know how it works, this is done. You can then focus on the rest. And so I think we're I would recommend to make sure that you tick these boxes, because it's an easy win, and then you can focus on the rest.
Fantastic. And hopefully you can add this podcast to your list of recommendations after we finish.
Totally, totally. That's part of
It's,
the curiosity.
yeah, it's part of the curiosity. So we've come to the end of our interview, unfortunately, and I want to first thank you again for sharing your insight. It was really interesting to hear from you and to hear about your experience, whether it be at Versus or at Danone, and it's been really a great conversation. But I also wanted to ask if you have any final takeaways or pieces of advice that you want to give our audience before we sign off.
Uh, I think we covered
Right.
almost everything.
Curious. Be curious.
Yeah. So again, otherwise, I just say seize any opportunity. Let yourself uh, give yourself the freedom of trying stuff that you don't think or you're not sure you're up for, because more often than not, it turns out that it works perfectly well. And we're lucky enough to be at a moment in time where you're not defined by one job for your entire life. So explore, do more things, because as an individual, it will enrich you, and in the workplace it will become a strength. So
For sure. Um, and that's a great piece of advice. And if anyone wanted to like follow you on like any social media or any way to
I'm
connect,
very bad at that. Very bad at that.
at least you're being
I
honest. Transparency
yeah,
is important.
I'm on LinkedIn. I've been on Twitter for like 10 years, but I'm a very I'm a stalker. I don't post much. I read a lot, but I don't post much. I guess LinkedIn is the safest place
Be the
where you can
safest
find
bet.
me.
Yeah, for
Yeah,
sure. Well,
yeah.
again, thank you so much, Bertrand, for sharing your insights with us today. And thanks everyone for listening in. As always, for more perspectives on the content marketing industry in Europe, check out veracontent.com/mix and keep tuning into the podcast for more interviews with content experts. So we'll see you next time. Thanks again.
Thanks for having me.